Hey everybody, Danielle Hargenrader here, and welcome to another episode of Unleash Your Inner Diabetes Dominator. Very happy to bring you another awesome guest living happy and healthy with diabetes. I'm going to read you his quick bio and we're going to get right into his story. So Mike Barry was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes at the age of 16, and he lives in Chicago with his amazing and supportive family. So Mike, thank you for taking the time to join us today. How are you?
I'm doing very well because I'm not at work anymore. I'm home for the evening.
I bet a lot of people share those same sentiments.
Right.
So as we always do here, we want to know about you and your story. So kind of give us the rundown on your diagnosis and the path you've traveled with diabetes from then till now.
I was 16 when I was diagnosed. As a teenager, I was 150 pounds, 5'11", so not that big to begin with. And I lost 30 pounds and didn't really feel very well. I was like sleeping through class and drinking tons of water and peeing all the time, the usual litany of things. And finally one morning after eating some Captain Crunch and drinking another gallon of Kool-Aid, I threw up, and Mom's like, we're going to the doctor. So, okay, smart move going there. I think it was like 685 or something. So that was pretty elevated. And, at the time, and I had a cast too. I'd sprained my ankle playing soccer. So I was like, hop along. And okay, we're going to go to the hospital for a week. Well, it was not on the menu. I think it was right after winter break. We were just supposed to be getting back to school, and my mom went and advocated for me immediately to not get kicked out of driver's ed because they were waiting for that, and that was a big deal at the time. So
that was nice of her.
It was very nice. She's a wonderful person as well. And so then I went to the hospital and was like share the room with this 85-year-old guy who was just miserable, which was also weird, but got things together. My parents found a cool endo, and I just kind of rolled on from there. And I felt so much better immediately once the insulin started cooking. I was like, wow, I feel way better. And I didn't want to ever feel that way again. I've kind of worked to avoid feeling horrible ever since then, and it's worked for the most part.
Yeah. So one of the things that I admire about you is your way that you are so very on top of your diabetes management, but not in a way that's you're very calculated about it. So was that just from the get-go? 16 years old, you were like, this is the way it is, or was that a progression? How did that end up happening?
I think a lot of it was at that age, like I was planning on going to Europe senior year with the advanced placement U.S. history or European history class was a big deal, and that was cool. I didn't want to screw it up, but we were only testing 4 times a day, so it was kind of winging it. I didn't really think that much about it at the time. Then when I went to college, the University of Illinois is a very good school for disabilities. Tatiana McFadden, who's going to win the marathon in Rio, and I think that she's running every race, the 100-meter sprints up to the marathon, and she pretty much, I think, is the favorite of all of them. And she went there and is a big wheelchair athlete, and the school has always taken care of people with disabilities and been on the forefront of disability research. So I don't like to consider diabetes a disability, but they said, you need 7 strips a day, which at the time was like a gold mine. Like, whoa, 7, that'll be awesome. And, they know college students and knew you're staying up all night studying very hard for all your classes and do all of that, and partying and having strobe lights and various other antics that I engaged in. So I was like, okay, dude, it's 2 a.m. I better test my blood sugar. Oh, whoa, it's 200. I better have a little more insulin to cover the tail end of the keg or whatever, or going to Steak and Shake or, various other things that people in college do. So I was testing a lot, and I had many accidents and several catastrophic hypos, and somehow my roommates were able to discern passed out Mike from this versus hypo Mike, and I survived. So then I went on and kept rolling along, and I kind of almost stumbled on MDI before MDI was done, because with RNN, you'd have like your RN shot in the morning, and then the N would kick in around lunchtime. You'd I better eat some lunch because I'm frying my brains out, or I'm high at lunch. I better, so I'd start having more R, not realizing that the NPH had only a 53% chance of peaking when it was supposed to, which is what my pump trainer told me. So I went on like that for a long time, and life moved on, and went to grad school and moved back to town, played in bands, met a wife, started having a family. But over time, I gained like a ton of weight because I was like pounding insulin and like eating potato chips and various other horrible things. Because when you get hypo, you get the munchies. So when I peaked in like 2004, I was like, whoa, 275 pounds. That's a little bit chunky for somebody who's 5'10", who used to be 150 and was down to 120 when I was diagnosed. So that's more than 2 times what I weighed. So I started working out more. A friend of mine was a Taekwondo instructor with a local park district class. My daughter was 6. I'm like, well, that'd be good if she could learn how to beat people up and become fierce and all that, which she didn't like it as much as I did, but the family went and we kept at it for a few years. And I started eating less and then got really more into Taekwondo, working out like 5 or 6 times a week and going for bike rides and walks at first, and then started running. And so it all kind of fed together and everything went well, but my blood sugar got out of whack a little bit. And my A1C went up as I moved into, I was like really intensely into it and was learning how to teach classes and teaching classes. And I didn't want to zonk out in front of students because that would be out of control. And you don't want to do that. So I just kind of let things slide. My A1C went up when I had about 10 years where I didn't go to the doctor at all because Walgreens was really good at getting prescriptions refilled without needing to mess around with appointments. I'd kind of snake the doctor, and finally she fired me and I went to a new doctor, and I'd roll in there and he's like, wow, your A1C is 5.8. That's amazing. And I still have a pin he gave me that says A1C less than 7 that some company was passing out at the time. So I saved that for a souvenir. But then it drifted up and it was like 7.2, 7.7. And a buddy at work, my friend Justin, said, you got to talk to my wife. She has a pump. It's awesome. We went out, had dinner. Christy ran through her shtick, told me all about it. I'm like, oh, wow. Hypos are less hairy. It's easier to control. You can adjust things for working out. And like I was sold almost immediately. Told my doctor, who was a GP, who I picked because he was somewhat heavier in his glamour shot online. I was heavier at the time. And it was probably down to like maybe 220 or 230, and was keeping at it, working out, and that was good. So he's like, okay, great. Well, you're going to the endo now. So I had to find an endo, and I looked at the 2 endos online. There was like the old white guy and the young Indian lady. And I'm like, I'm going with the young Indian lady. It'll probably be easier to get into her faster. She's younger. She's not going to have a bunch of old patients to manage. So I got in within a couple weeks. And then about a month later, I had the pump. So during that time, like the first thing I did was I was really into fantasy baseball at the time. So I knew about message boards from that. There's a great fantasy baseball site, Fantasy Baseball Cafe, where they have a message board, and you're like, wow, which second baseman should I pick up tomorrow? My guy got hurt. Oh, this guy rakes lefties, and he's playing a lefty. Pick him. So, okay, same thing could apply to diabetes. So I found the diabetes online community through the ADA message board first.
And what year was that, would you say?
That was 2008.
2008, okay.
Or 2009, actually, 2009. No, 2008 was when I started pumping, and 2009 was the black belt, but that was down the road a bit still. So, yeah, I found some people online. I learned about Think Like a Pancreas very quickly and pumping insulin. So I got both those books on Amazon. I probably was like, I need these immediately and going to pay extra for delivery or whatever. So I got those books. I read them, and they just like, was like, wow, this totally makes sense. It's absolutely what I'm doing. It makes sense, and I can't wait to get my pump. So I still had to wait and do the logging and all that. I went through a phase where I'm like, logging? That's crap. I'm not going to log anything. I'll just make it up. And I'm sitting there, if I'm making it up, what would my blood sugar be after? Oh, I'll just write down the actual blood sugar. It's easier because I'm lazy that way. And so I had this log, and I threw it out when we moved, and I'm still bummed about it because it was in like a little book, and it was a complete disaster mess. And it would be awesome to be able to share pictures of it, but it's long gone. So everything fell into place. I got the pump, went through pump training, sitting there the whole time. 2 tacos or 3 tacos for lunch? 2 tacos, okay, I'll 2 tacos for lunch. 2 hours later, it was like 85. I'm like, I'm set. That's what I want, 85 milligrams per deciliter.
I love it. They're just like, I'm going to do my basal rate testing by taco.
Yeah, well, it was like Taco Bell. I could look up how much food it was. It was very easy carb counting, you know, because I already killed 2 hours of work sitting through pump training. I didn't want to like bother jacking around. So it was very easy, and it worked, you know, and you have ups and downs all the time. We had like one of the night, my wife had gone to like one or two of the classes, and like in the middle of the night, one night we felt this rumbling, and she's like, "Oh my God, wake up and test your blood sugar. You're having an insulin reaction." And it turned out there was an earthquake in central Illinois, which was not a hot earthquake zone, but there's the New Madrid fault down by Missouri. So we had a weird earthquake, and there were pictures of liquor stores in Mount Vernon, a couple hours south, with bottles all over the floor and stuff. So whatever. So we survived that, and things went on. So about a year later, yeah, go ahead.
I was actually I just want to touch on the weight loss journey that you had, because a lot of people, that's a lot of people that follow what I do are into, weight loss and things like that. So you just kind of, I would say 275 for a guy at 5'10", like you said, is a little heavy, and you took it upon yourself just to start doing that. What was the time between, hey, I'm going to start walking and doing Taekwondo, to where you got from where?
That was 2004. Then I think maybe 2007, I signed up for the instructor program at the Dojang, which was like a year of lessons. And it also involved a lot of like kind of philosophical studies or psychological studies. We read this book, Flow, by Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi, who I've talked about before, which is really awesome, about how the peak human experience is getting engaged with something, whether it's your job of, if you're building radios in a factory and you build 8 radios a day, you're going to keep at it for a while, and you're going to say, I'm going to see if I can build 9 radios a day. It's just the natural process of like getting better at something comes very naturally to humans. And when you're not trying to get better at something, you turn into kind of a, if you're just like, I'm going to watch TV every night and stare at the TV and watch zombies eating people while I eat potato chips, you're not going to get better at something. You're just going to become disengaged from that natural urge to improve that you can have. And when you have diabetes and you've been exposed to fantasy baseball and lengthy email feuds with your guy buddies about how many categories do we want to use this year? Are we going to use OPS or batting average, or are we going to use ERA or walks, hits per inning pitch? There's all these like statistics, and statistical analysis of baseball is kind of a field that's taken off over the last few years. So there's a lot of interesting things you can learn about baseball, and the same things kind of go with diabetes. There's been a lot of conversation in the diabetes online community, or articles that were more than just A1C. Well, what are you going to do with all these numbers? You're going to use A1C and your 7-day average and 30-day average, which are really easy to get out of the Medtronic pumps. You can pull them up in seconds and see, oh, my numbers are drifting a little bit. My standard deviation is up from last week. What have I been doing? Was it fried chicken? Was it not eating enough? Was it eating too much? Or my after lunch numbers crashing out every day, and so I'm having a snack? Or there's all kinds of ways you can look at different groups of numbers and use them to kind of nudge your diabetes in a direction. And there isn't that much conversations about the specifics of it, because it's always, well, you have to talk to your doctor and find out what to do. And I don't really have those conversations with my doctor, but I have them myself in my head constantly.
Right. So interesting, because I like the whole Flow book as well, and I like the idea. Well, I'm a big fan of the idea of, it's natural, like you said, the human progression to say, well, I just did that and I didn't think I could do that. Well, let me see what else I can do, because you convinced yourself that you could do something else. Now, the way you're talking about your kind of way that you got into your diabetes management almost sounds like a bit of gamification. Is that just my?
Yeah. Because I go like having no numbers or very few numbers and never writing anything down, and be like, oh, sorry, I forgot my log again, doctor. Can I have more prescriptions? Oh, sure, you can do that. And there was a little bit of gamification in that, but having the numbers and being able to put them into action and then seeing them and then going back to the doctor for my first post-pump A1C is, 5.8. That's way better than 7.7, or, and again, better is somewhat questionable, because I've seen people online say that their doctor bitched at them for having a 5.8 because it was too low or whatever. Well,
yes,
whatever.
I've seen that as well. So that's just, that's like anybody's going to have different opinions, but I think that's an individual decision.
Fed myself, and it was like 5.8, 5.8, 5.8. And then, about a year later, I blew off the black belt test in 2008 when I was ready, because it was like conflicted with the election. I was involved in political campaigning. I'm like, no, I said I was going to Indianapolis. I'm going to Indianapolis. And we went there and won. So that was validating and good too, outside of the diabetes field, to engage in something completely different. That was a good experience for me. So then in May rolls around, black belt test all day. My blood sugar is like 250, 275. It was just through the roof because this huge culmination of things. And 2 weeks before that, they announced my office was closing, and I was working on moving to Chicago from Champaign, which was a huge thing for the family, but that's worked out very well too. And so that all fell by the wayside. I got through it. I got my black belt, but then I unplugged from Taekwondo. So, well, what am I going to do now? Well, the town we moved to is a pretty relatively affluent town, and they have beautiful trails that connect to trails all over Chicago. And we're sitting around at a wild party one night. So, let's run a half marathon. Okay, I'll run a half marathon. So I ran that, and
just like that.
Yeah. Well, it took a while, it was like through the winter, and I trained and started running. And my aunt also runs a therapy horse barn, and they have one too. So I signed up for that, and they were like 2 half marathons, 2 weeks apart. I'm like, whatever, I'm sure I can do that. No problem. I was working. So I had no idea what I was getting into. So you have like winter in Chicago, you're trying to run. Okay, it's time to do the 8 miler. And the first time I ran more than 6 miles, it was like, I didn't totally know what I was doing. I was checking around with basal rates, and I think I had a CG. No, I didn't have a CGM quite yet. So I set out, I run, I probably had insulin on board or something, like a couple miles into it. What's my blood sugar anyway? Fish meter out, get the meter out of the pockets. Oh, 39, crap. Well, am I going to just give up? Hell no. When the Germans bombed Pearl Harbor, we didn't just give up. Let's have a bunch of, whatever they were, Smarties at the time, sprint a couple blocks, get some adrenaline going, checking 15 minutes later, I was back to 75. So I knew it was going in the right direction, just kept running and slogged through it. Because in Chicago in the winter, you have like a day where you might have good weather, and then next week there's going to be a blizzard. You won't be able to run outside for however long. So I got through the 8 miles, survived, it worked. I ended up doing like 3 10-milers on the treadmill, which was absolutely miserable. I tried watching college basketball. It was okay entertainment, but it was just like, ugh. So finally got through that, hit the races. Or I had one day outside, I ran 13 beforehand just to make sure there weren't any blood sugar nightmares. There weren't. Then I decided to get a CGM, which I got like a week before the race. I was like, wow, this is the best thing ever. It's like watching blood sugar in real time almost, or 20 minutes ago. And it was awesome. So the first race, I'm all set, and the IV 3000 tape didn't hold it on for more than 3 miles. Oh, crap, I'm screwed now. So I ran the race, finished it, chatted with my online friends, found out about OpSite FlexiFix. The next race was perfect. I ran a little bit faster. I was happy with that. It was a nice day. We went back to Champaign, which was the last time I was back in Champaign. But it was like a trip down memory lane, so that was cool.
Very
too.
Cool. Yeah, that's awesome. So yeah, that's always impressive. I think even somebody who's gone through transformations like me is like, I don't think I ever just, made that decision in like 1 second. I was like, yeah, I'm just going to do that. Like, it was always like a process. So I think that's a very advantageous quality to possess in your mind. But I would
from Taekwondo is you set a goal and you figure out how you're going to get there, and then you just do it.
Yeah, absolutely. Can you give me a little bit more information? So you said you found the diabetes online community through the American Diabetes Association page. What was your kind of foray into the diabetes online community? I know you're a fan of 2diabetes.org, which I'm always promoting. Amazing site. Was that your first time like interacting with other people that had diabetes since you've had it?
Much. I've like run into maybe like half a dozen people over the years, and it was very low grade contact with anybody with diabetes. So I was like on Planet Mike. So I'm like, okay, I need a name. What's my name going to be? Well, my fantasy football team was Purple Haze. So I picked Acid Rock 34, thinking of Walter Payton and Purple Haze for my Yahoo email address. So then blammo, there goes Acid Rock 23. So I just picked that, the number of the Illuminati or whatever. I was feeling pretty groovy about my diabetes at the time, but I didn't know what I was getting into talking about stuff online. But people online like spoke the same language. It was very easy to talk to. There was, people I met years ago that I still remember, Megan Lynn 77 at the ADA site who just disappeared. But and she was a very nice person. And one time she typed I'm sure it was a typo because I don't think she would say that, but she typed endork, and I'm like, endork is the best term ever.
It's like a dorky endocrinologist.
Right. You know, and it's just, you have these people you remember years later, Gary, there's nothing worse than diabetes. I'm like, I think being burned alive would be worse than diabetes.
I could think of like 100 things that are worse than diabetes pretty easily.
Yeah, so, you know, you run into these people and you have these long conversations. And like when we moved to Chicago in 2009, the account got jacked up and a lot of people were having account problems at the ADA site, and it didn't seem like they were dealing with it. A lot of the people who seemed to be having more problems, or people were sharing, so-and-so's emailing me, like the older people who were not dealing with the password situation. Maybe they went to like more complicated or bigger passwords, and people had trouble, and I had the same problems. And I'm just like, well, I've heard about this 2 place. I'll go check it out. And it seemed a little bit, there were like more conversations, and the conversations were interesting, and they percolated a little bit more rapidly. So I'm like, I'm going to check it out and hang out here. So I hung out there, made a lot of friends, got yelled at for swearing, because at first there was intermittent swearing, and then they decided to clamp down on swearing. So I'm like, okay, whatever, I can not swear. I can use punctuation marks if I needed to.
Nice. So, go ahead.
So that was it.
Yeah, I was going to say, did you find that the interaction with other people with diabetes on a regular basis had an effect on your life, on your outlook on living with diabetes, or what was the...
Yeah, I felt like I got good feedback from people that I was helping people with my chattering about stuff. And here's what I did. You know, I look at it like, you know, in the fantasy baseball and go, well, if I'm running low every day after lunch, I might nudge my carb ratio for my lunchtime bolus down a little bit and just see what happens. And sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. And sometimes smoothing out the lunch turbulence can help your dinner too. If you go into dinner with a better, flatter curve, then you can eat dinner more liberally or enjoy dinner more. Dinner's less of a chore.
Yeah. So Mike and I actually met at the first Diabetes UnConference in 2015. Now, was that your first in-person conference?
No, there was a diabetics who run marathons group on 2. So I hooked up with them when I was starting with the halves, and then having like a surly tween daughter at the time was like, well, why don't you run a full marathon? Okay, fine. I'm going to run a full marathon. And the town I live in, Naperville, Illinois, has a running store that's very good. They've won awards as being the best running store in the country, and they have a very large and supportive marathon group. So I'm like, I'll just do that. And so you look at the schedule and you're like, well, the first week you run 7 miles, then you run 8 miles, then you run 7 miles, then you run 10 miles. Well, I've done that before, no problem. And so you meet these people and you pick what pace you're going to run at. You run all summer and you get to know each other a little bit. Then you get the magic moment when 14 miles, because if you run a half marathon, you probably haven't run 14 miles before. So I did that and got going with that. And then I met these people online. Well, the race that they prepped for was Chicago, which is a big race. So some of the people in the group were coming to Chicago. So I'm like, well, hey, let's connect up together. We'll have breakfast the day before the race. You know, for me, that's like the last big meal before a race, because you want to sort of clear things out and smooth out your blood sugar too is a good idea. So we walked around the park with my buddies Dane and Dr. Susie, who's at 2. Sometimes I haven't seen her as much because I haven't been hanging out there as much either, but I went out to California later and ran a race with her. She's really cool, really very adult diagnosed person, but very meticulous, good control, low carb, that whole thing. Really neat person. I like meeting her a lot. So that was fun. And then in 2013, the ADA Scientific Conference was in Chicago, and they were looking for a venue. And Emily's like, well, we were looking at this one place. And I'm like, no, it's the wrong location. Try this place, The Gauge on Michigan Avenue. It's great. It's kind of a little bit hipster bar food. They checked it out. They had a beautiful basement room. It was a great event. So I met Heather Gable was working the door. I don't remember, was it Emily or somebody? I met Melissa Lee there. I met Manny. They had a cocktail party the night before from some organization. It might have been Medtronic. I met a whole bunch of people there. It was a really good time just meeting all these people, meeting new people. I met Tim Brand there. I met Mike Lawson was involved. I just met a zillion people at that one location, all in like a few rooms. and then blam, we're off to the races. So
that's awesome. Yeah, no, that's a great lineup of people to meet all in one shot. So we went to the Unconference in 2015, and then saw you there again in 2016. Right. But what happened was that you made an impression on people there in 2015, so much so that Christelle, I'm assuming, asked you to present a little workshop on your diabetes management skills.
Right.
Tell me a little bit about that, because I think that's really exciting.
Oh, it was super intimidating. I was very nervous. You know, there were a lot of super heavy people. You know, Steve Ponder is the doctor, and I have no credentials at all. I'm a total.
Yes, you do. You're a diabetes expert. You live with diabetes. You're everybody is a diabetes expert that lives with diabetes. That's your credentials. You going low?
Just mid. Chasing the dragon.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it was interesting. I feel like a lot of people are. Let me eat this real quick.
Yeah, take your time. Yeah, actually, this is not the first time. As people who watch my interviews, they know people going low during the interviews is par for the course. So I always check. I have my glucose here, and I always make sure everybody I'm interviewing has glucose with them, because guess what? This is real life.
Buzz just burns it off. So anyway, so my whole thing is like everybody with diabetes should try to do better all the time, because that's, again, the flow thing. It's more natural to try to do better, and I think the goals and targets are very much middle of the road. I mean, the target of 7 is like $1.45 average, or $1.50, somewhere in that range. And why shoot for that? You should shoot for normal blood sugar or more normal blood sugar. If your blood sugar is not normal, shoot for more normal. If your blood sugar is normal, and I've been there for a pretty long time now, shoot for, smoother, lower standard deviation, or keep your, various other numbers moving in the right direction. And I think it's possible. Steve Ponder does it. Steve Ponder's written a great book, Sugar Surfing, about it. Pretty much the kind of way that I look at it. You don't expect the same thing every day, because it's not going to be the same thing every day.
Yep, I totally agree. One of the things I teach constantly is being comfortable with adjusting your own insulin needs. And didn't know I was a sugar surfer until I interviewed Steve a year ago, even at this point. He's like, oh, you're already sugar surfing, but you just don't know it. And it's true. I mean, that's just what I naturally became inclined to do after years of the flow of getting into the flow. So I think it's an amazing thing that and just in my own, I feel with the flow thing, if you're not growing, you're stagnating, and I feel like nobody wants to stagnate. I mean, unless it's something you really enjoy, but which is certainly possible. I don't know, but most humans have the natural inclination to want to grow in some way. So.
And you have, it's like a disease, and you can win little battles all the time. If your blood sugar is jacked up, and everybody has jacked up blood sugar every now and then, you can do a good job fixing it. And I'm going to be immortalized on camera having,
But you were having a little win. You were fixing it.
Right. I just want to nudge it back in the right direction.
That's
insulin board's mostly cooked off by now, so I can chillax. In 10 minutes, I'll be back in action. And
I love how you refer to insulin working as it cooking. You've always done that, and I've always loved it.
Well, cooking off is when
the tail.
You hit the weapons dump and it blows up. Like my uncle, or not uncle, cousin, Jimmy was in Vietnam, and he talks about they're watching a movie and the mortar rounds launched into the ammo dump, and it just started cooking off because it was blowing up. So, it's always there working, and it cooks off.
Yeah. Hey, no, I like it. So as I always do here, as we come towards the end, I always ask the people I'm talking to share what they feel their top 3 tips for living happy and healthy with diabetes are. Not necessarily advice, this isn't medical advice, but it's just, this is what's worked for Mike. These are the top 3 things that I think work best for me. So what would you say that you think they are?
I think you have to fight for your rights to test your blood sugar. And I think testing your blood sugar a lot is very important. When I've got somewhere in my computer, I've got a document saved where you have, if you go through your day, you should be testing your blood sugar at least 12 times a day, because if you have a job, you have to drive, and you're supposed to know what your blood sugar is before you drive. And with the CGM, a lot of people with CGMs cheat here and there, and will, use that number. And I think you can get into a place where you're comfortable enough to rely on your CGM and not test your blood sugar before you drive. But, I understand parents of teenagers want their kids to test their blood sugar, and that's an important responsibility and deal to make. So I think testing your blood sugar is something that's worth fighting for. And I think there's a lot of activism that needs to be done about testing blood sugar, that the ridiculous limits placed on blood sugar by Medicare that insurance companies use to limit blood sugar testing to the amount that Medicare has. So
yeah, I've went through very similar situations with that in my past, where I would have to fight for the test strips, and it was like to me, it was like the question is like, well, you're already physically fit. Why are you going to the gym? It's like saying, well, your blood sugar's in such good control. Why do you need all these test strips? It's like, it is because I have the test strips that I have good control, and it's because I go to the. That's why it's nuts, and I think it's totally worth fighting for. And for me, before I got my CGM, my rule of thumb was I tested once an hour for every hour I was awake. That was on average 16 hours a day. That was just my rule, and it wasn't even like a thing. It was like, oh, it's a new hour, let me test. Oh, it's a new hour. It's just part of, because I wanted to know. That's all.
Yep.
Yeah,
so
and I fought hard for it.
Blood sugar is good. I think studying your food is a very good thing to do. It's something I didn't really do at all. I totally winged it. I'm like, okay, I'm going to eat broccoli and hot sauce while I'm trying to lose weight. And I would eat broccoli and hot sauce, and then I'd lose weight. And so it reinforced that I could lose weight. And I think you can have the same relationship with your blood sugar. It's like, well, if I want to eat cereal, what can I do to eat cereal? And I'm like, I cannot eat cereal every day for breakfast without having a couple days where it's going to blow up without Afrezza. And Afrezza seems to manage cereal very well, and I'm very enthused about it, but I'm still lazy, and it's easier to eat a Kind bar, because a Kind bar is even easier to eat. And it
Big fan.
really flat blood sugar coming out of breakfast. I can clean up the dawn phenomenon safely and eat it. So, that's what I do. With the moving this year, we moved, we have a bigger house, yada, yada, yada. I've not been able to get into the eggs thing, which also is very reliable, but it's a chore. I like to throw veggies in the eggs, and somehow I fell off the egg bandwagon, but maybe I'll get back on. But I've studied food enough that I know how it works, and I know how to manage it. And I have a scale. That was like a thing with the pump. I'm like, well, how much is 28 grams of cereal anyway? Oh, I'm going to dump some back in the box because I weigh more than it's serving.
Yeah.
And interesting, my daughter had a exchange student from Spain, and she ate a serving size of cereal for breakfast. I've never seen anyone else, particularly a teenager, eat a serving size of cereal, but she's like, here's the little bowl, and bam, she's on it.
Mindful eating. Yeah, it's a big deal. So we have checking your blood sugar often, learning about food, and what's number 3?
Feel confident that if you do those things, you can learn how to improve your diabetes management. And the confidence is not there in a lot of people. I see a lot of posts that, oh, my doctor said this, or my doctor yelled at me, or, things are not going well. Well, what can you do to make it better? And you say, like, one of the first things that I saw online was somebody on the ADA site, fix one meal at a time. Don't fix your whole day. Just say, what can I do to fix lunch every day? Do it for like 2 weeks. See if you can manage to fix your lunch and post-lunch environment, and see how that plays out for the rest of your day. And whatever you're doing, you might be able to do that, and then you've won something. And then you say, okay, let's do dinner. I've got lunch, let's do dinner. I mean, I have a really boring food lifestyle because I work in an office. The restaurants are not enticing enough to want to go out to eat. It's expensive. It's weight nudging up. So I just eat pretty much the same thing every day. It varies.
So
Flavors, chicken, rice, whatever.
Yep.
So it's boring, but it works, and it makes controlling diabetes easier. And I splurge in the evenings and on weekends, like the 3-day thing coming up. And so
exciting. Yeah, no, I love it. I love your kind of, it's just, to me, when I met you, I was just like, it's like a no nonsense. This is the way it is. It is what it is. And if it isn't what it is, then let's try and, it's just, I just, you have a very unique personality that I appreciate. And I think a lot of people in the diabetes community also appreciate that you're so open with sharing your methods, your thoughts, and just your results and all that stuff. So thank you for doing that. And thank you for taking the time to come share that with me and everybody else.
Feedback. I'll always remember when we met at the Hash House a Go-Go and having the giant stack of fried chicken
Chicken
with
and waffles. Yeah.
organic buddy Dr. Jody Stanislas, our other friends that we met there. I guess Kathleen is coming back. I haven't heard a peep from her since then, but she's signed up for Atlantic City, I saw.
Nice. Yeah, a lot of great people. So cool. So is there anything else you'd like to share with the diabetes online community before we wrap it up?
Finally, tomorrow, another diabetes milestone. I'm meeting my U.S. representative. Somebody from the JDRF reached out who wants to do this. I'm like, hey, I'll do it. And a few emails later, bam.
Awesome.
So that'll be interesting.
Well, on behalf of the diabetes community, I thank you for stepping up and speaking on our behalf, because I know you have our best interests in mind, and that's not my passion. So I appreciate everybody who does do that. Yeah.
Well, it's worth trying to do, though. It's the format of the meeting. It's the JDRF. It's a promise meeting. You try to get your representative to promise not to forget you. So I happen to have I think it'll be a pretty easy meeting, because our representative, Bill Foster, is a science guy. He's a scientist. I think he used to work at Fermilab out here, that one of the accelerators near Chicago. So he's a smart guy. He's a Democrat. He is not a science denier by any means. So I think speaking to him about the science of diabetes from my perspective will be interesting. I hope to be able to get him on board to help us out.
Yeah, I have confidence that you will. I was going to say, because I think that most people would agree you're not an easy to forget person. So good.
I'll behave myself, though.
Perfect. All right. Well, I can't thank you enough for taking the time to sit down with me today. I love your story, love your attitude about life in general. And so as always, I will say, if you enjoyed this video and Mike's wonderful outlook on living happy and healthy with diabetes, give us a thumbs up, subscribe for more interviews. And as always, I will catch you on the next episode of Unleash Your Inner Diabetes Dominator. Thank you.
Sounds good.